Hey everyone, been a while, but I'm finally back again, and today we're talking about rainbow beacons. Okay, I know we're basically always talking about rainbow beacons, but this time we're getting a little bit more mechanical. In the previous video, we looked at a little bit of the nuances that go into creating smooth rainbow beacon gradients like this one, and what goes into each column of glass and the colors that make it up. But the big problem is that achieving a display like this ends up being a little expensive, requiring just a couple more beacons and nether stars than maybe the average person has access to, so if we're being economical, it could be advisable to figure out how to put all of these colors into one beacon. So that's what I intended to do with all of this nonsense. I wanted to make a rainbow beacon that could cycle through all the colors that I wanted, while still remaining relatively economical for the average player to build. Okay, so to get started, obviously our goal is to be able to input each and every single one of these columns of glass right here into a beacon beam in order to display our full spectrum of colors, one after the other with smooth transitions. Now, this sort of problem isn't anything new, and there's a variety of different ways that people are going to try and tackle this, but one of the most common ways is through the use of a feed tape. And this makes perfect sense, because what we've got here is a long, continuous stream of blocks that we need to move through a central location, and it just makes sense to use a feed tape to transport that tape through a beacon beam. And this sort of design approach has been used to great effect by a lot of different people. For example, this YouTuber named Pitefar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, used this design. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit outdated, but it's a perfect example of using a large feed tape containing that big stream of colors and simply just running it through a beacon beam. There's a lot of extra complexity that goes into it that we'll certainly be getting into later, but this is the general idea behind a lot of rainbow beacon design concepts. And even though it's tried and true, this is not what we're going to be using today, because quite frankly, to me it seems like it's a lot of waste. In a giant feed tape display, you're unable to reuse the same blocks that had appeared previously in a feed tape. So this red stained glass, although it's in the same position in the beacon beam, this one has to be a different piece of glass than is used in any of these other instances. That means that even with this cheapskate rainbow tape with the extra layer of filler white glass at the bottom, we're still using 64 pieces of red stained glass, when realistically we're not going to be needing even remotely that much. It's a waste of space and resources in my opinion. But that kind of change is a little bit more simpler said than done. See, when you're saving space on potentially reusing glass, you're also wasting space because now you need a bunch of extra componentry to make sure the machine actually remembers this tape layout and properly reuses its resources. However, it gets a little bit better when you realize that in each and every section of 16, at least for the tape that I'm using, we're actually only using two colors. We're just switching back and forth between a primary color, here it's purple, and a secondary color, that's red. When we move to the next set of 16, we swap the primary color with what was the secondary color, and we input a new secondary color. We keep doing this, and it's a pretty repeatable pattern that also follows binary, which, if you want to know why, you can check out the previous video. But essentially this means that it should be pretty easy to make an internal little computer that remembers exactly how to rebuild this tape from only a smaller set of glass blocks. Now, before we get into the mechanics, one of the little added complexities I sort of glossed over with the feed tape design is that things get a little bit difficult when you just try to do it as simply as you might think it could be. Here, I've got a simple feed tape that's just red, and you'd think that we'd only get red. But the reality is we're going to get these flashes of white that kind of look horrible, and that's because when the blocks are moving, they're actually not showing any color. As you can see, if I place a block here, freeze the game, and then cause this to move. As these blocks are transparent, and you can see that they're moving by the fact that they're not connecting with my texture pack, they're not actually contributing to the beacon beam anymore, leading it to be white. In order to actually adjust the color of a beacon beam without giving people sickness, is to use something called 0 ticks, which, as the name suggests, powers a piston for exactly 0 ticks, which causes the block that we want to put into the beacon beam to be teleported into it instantaneously. Like so. And if I go ahead and stop time, push this button, and then step 6 ticks forward, this block is moved instantaneously before the blue block even has a chance to leave yet, and thus it instantly transitions to the color we're looking for without any really annoying flashing. And that's what a vast majority of designs are using, including this one that I showed earlier. But guess what? There is another way to deal with this problem. It might not be nearly as efficient as some other designs, which I'm going to showcase at the end of this video, but it's sort of the way that I developed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and what I'm essentially doing is having 2 sticky pistons that are triggered at the same time, that have a glass block on top that isn't part of the beacon beam that's about to be moved in, and a glass block that's already in the beacon beam. What this results in is an immediate transition, and I'll get into that in a bit, but it also allows us to very cleanly switch between 2 particular pieces of glass, which is exactly what we need for each of these sections, where we're just switching between a primary and secondary color pretty much over and over again following a particular sequence. Now, the reason why this is just as effective at accomplishing the task of a smooth transition as instantaneous movement is because if I go ahead and slow down time and then hit this button and step forward, what actually happens is both these piston heads arrive at the beacon beam right here at the same time. It's just that one of them is moving in a piece of glass and the other one is taking one away. And both of these actions actually happen at the same time, since the piston heads arrive at the same time. And what we end up with is a perfect transition, because there's actually never an instance in which there's moving glass exclusively in front of this beam. And that led to the first series of designs, which essentially incorporated this concept into switching the blocks back and forth right here where this beacon is supposed to be lit. And every now and then, when we're crossing sections, we swap out the primary and secondary color respectively. I guess you can still call this a feed tape design because we're still utilizing one to gain access to all 7 colors that we're going to be using here. But in a sense, it uses a bit more mechanics and it's a bit more complex than the standard feed tape setup, so I call it something different. Let's call it a hybrid design. Saying hybrid puts us in contrast with something like Cubic Meter's Rainbow Beacon design, in which case he just has a slice for every single color on its own, which is basically entirely computational, not a mix between feed tape and computational. This gives it way more compatibility with higher beacon sizes, and also definitely a lot more versatility, but that puts it a little bit out of our price range. As for actually determining the switching, if we look at our pattern, we can see that every single time that we transition to the next color, this bottom row switches. It switches from purple to red to purple to red to purple to red. Whereas this one switches every other time. Purple, purple, then switches to red, 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 then switches to purple, purple, and this one switches every 4 times, and then this one every 8 times. What this essentially is simple binary counting, in which case I can put lamps here to show each of the different layers switching and triggering. As you can see, this triggers every time, whereas this lamp triggers every other time, and then lastly, this lamp triggers every 4th time. I've omitted the last layer for reasons I'm going to include in the description, because that's a bunch of other technical nonsense. The last and most important piece of technology is this weird setup that allows us to first switch the secondary color and then switch the primary color immediately after. The reason we have to do this is because the pistons that actually move our current color set out of the way aren't always in contact with the glass that's being used with the beacon, because some of the glass is currently present inside of the beacon. We have to wait for the beacon glass to exit the beacon before we can swap it out, so we kind of have to do a little bit of staggering. That's done here with this little sticky piston and observer, and first it moves down, triggering exclusively this bottom sticky piston, and then it moves back up again, triggering the top one. And the bottom one, but that one already moved, so it doesn't really matter. Now, what's also great about these is that they're incredibly customizable, because you can basically just throw in whatever colors you want, and it's also possible to expand the feed tape to however much you want. This one uses 8 colors instead of 7, I've just thrown black in there, that totally interrupts the whole color spectrum, but just a demonstration. And this one is freaking out, but it has 10 colors. You can also use whatever transitions of colors you want. Here are 2 sequences of very particular color patterns that are very pretty. And lastly, we've got this sort of monochromatic breathing design. And by the way, if you're enjoying the type of content so far, enjoying the video, make sure to check out the other stuff I've made, as well as subscribe to the channel, it helps a lot. Anyways, back to some more stupid stuff. I had for a brief moment the fleeting idea that I quickly latched onto of a 2x2 version, which at the time was totally insane, and it still is, nothing's actually changed, but now I've actually made it. And it sucks, for a lot of reasons. First off, 2x2 beacons are normally really difficult. Now, normally going any higher than a 1x1 for a traditional feed tape design is an absolute catastrophe, because the reality is when you're trying to change out a color, and you want to get this blue color in, for example, you're going to have to push this red color out of the way, and that immediately involves shoving it into another beacon beam, and now you have two completely different colors in the same slice, which completely screws up everything. This problem is easily circumvented by more computational designs, but it can actually be sort of shortcut circumvented by hybrid designs too. What we essentially do is we move the feed tape 2 steps every time we want to change out the colors, and since the colors that are actually moving aren't inside of the beacon beam, but rather right next to it, we don't actually have to worry about colors getting pushed into other sections of the beacon beam. Anyways, a few incredibly terrible prototypes later, and we end up with this contraption that's so hacked together that it doesn't even have its own timing system. I've just got a player bot right-clicking this note block at a certain interval, and the wiring is shameful, to be honest. But it works, because we're able to utilize the fact that each time we move this feed tape over, we're actually moving it twice. So as you can see, these aqua blocks get shoved in 2 blocks forward. And that essentially makes me, as far as I'm concerned, the only person to have ever made a 2x2 rainbow beacon using feed tapes, with air quotes, because it's technically a hybrid design. Anyways, I won't talk about this much longer. It's totally insane, it's completely horribly wired, but it's a proof of concept, and I challenge anybody who has the guts and actual patience to deal with this thing and possibly make a slightly better design. Anyways, so let's say you want to build this thing. Even though I'm going to provide you with a world download, I certainly don't recommend actually using my design, because in the 2 months that I was making the video, or rather taking a break from making videos, a bunch of other people created a bunch of better designs completely independently. One example is the brilliant channel Peter Jiang TW, forgive me for any butchered pronunciations. They are incredible, they design a bunch of really cool stuff, especially involving smoke sensors, and they released a brilliant rainbow beacon concept along with a tutorial. I highly recommend you go check out their channel, links in the description. I'm also getting sabotaged by people on my own Discord server by this incredibly brilliant person named SpaceFun101, who wasn't satisfied with my design along with their very own designs either, because they kept iterating upon this thing to create these incredibly tiny designs, which are just absolutely brilliant, and they use a bunch of different techniques that I didn't even think of, although they don't work in this version because they use copper bulbs and I'm on 1.20.1. If you're on a neuro version like them and you're looking for these designs, you'll find them on the Discord server. Anyways, that's about it for this time. Go have fun lighting up the sky with your beacon displays. Make sure to check out the Discord server, subscribe to the channel, check out the other stuff I've made if it interests you, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully that'll be soon, probably not 2 months.